Hello guys! In this video, you'll learn how to use the Mapping Test tool. Introduction. The Mapping Test tool lets users validate and simulate data mappings for both inbound and outbound interfaces without posting real data. It supports multiple payload formats and provides a structured preview of the mapping results, making it easier to debug and analyze your mapping logic. With test mapping, you can execute a sample payload, review the transformed mapped output, and confirm that your source structure, field mappings, and formula/transform rules are correct before deployment or real inbound processing. It also helps you catch common issues early, such as incorrect source paths, missing required fields, lookup key problems, and data type mismatches. In this video, we have two cases to demonstrate. Case 1. Mapping Test tool with Inbound Interface. In this demo, we use an inbound interface that maps hierarchical data where the payload contains account as the parent and contact and case as child nodes. We will explain all buttons, the payload editor, and the result panel. Here, we have an existing inbound interface that we use in this video. You can see this is an inbound interface. The target subject is account. The message type is already linked to this interface, so SKYVVA can generate the source structure used in mapping. Now, click on Open Mapping. Here, the source is derived from the message type, and the target side is the account object. Before testing, we need to confirm that the mapping is complete. You can see that we already have a mapping, and we are using the concat formula, as you can see. This video does not cover formulas. This is just an example. If you want to learn more about formulas, please check out another video on the SKYVVA YouTube channel. You can see we use the concat formula to combine the ACC name and ACC number fields for testing. We have mapped 3 levels, including account, contact, and case. Make sure your mapping is correct. Click the Save button. Once your mapping is ready, we can start the test mapping. Now, click the Test Mapping button. Here you can see this pop-up screen. Here is the screen of the Mapping Test tool for Inbound Interface. This screen is divided into 2 parts. On the left, we have the payload editor. On the right, we have the result preview after executing the test. At the top, you can see the action buttons: Adapter Test Connection, Import File, Save File, Retrieve File, Execute, and Refresh. Now, we will explain each button first. For the Adapter Test Connection button, this button tests the connection of the source adapter used in the inbound interface. It confirms that SKYVVA can successfully connect to the source system or source location used for inbound data. If this connection fails, then test mapping may not be able to load data properly and real processing may also fail. For Import File button, this button is used to import a sample payload file into the editor. For example, CSV, XML, JSON files. This imported sample payload will be used as input when you execute test mapping. For Save File button, this button saves the current payload content as a reusable test file. It is useful when you want to test the same payload multiple times while adjusting the mapping. For Retrieve File button, this button loads back a payload that you saved previously using Save File. It helps you reuse test payloads without importing again. For Execute button, this is the main function: execute the mapping test. SKYVVA reads the payload from the editor, applies your inbound mapping rules, generates the output preview on the right side in the result panel. This allows you to verify the mapping output without running a full production processing job. For Refresh button, reload the test mapping screen. It is helpful to clear all payloads inside the editor and reset the result to the default screen. Now, let's look at the payload section. On the top left, you can see payload format tabs: CSV, XML, JSON, and message. These tables allow you to choose which payload format you want to test. In the example, we're using JSON payload. Now, in the payload editor, you can see the structure. This is a typical hierarchical inbound payload. Account is the parent. Contact is child. Case is a subchild under contact. You can use any payload format based on your requirements. Just make sure the payload matches the one you're using for testing. We use Postman as an example to call SKYVVA integrate and seamlessly push data to Salesforce. This is not covered in this video. It's just an example. If you want to learn more, please check another video on the SKYVVA YouTube channel. Now, let's look at the payload in Postman. Here's the payload. As you can see, it matches the payload that we put in the mapping test tool. Now, let's look at the right side. This is the result panel. The result panel shows a table with two main columns. Columns name, Salesforce object name, and field name. For column value, the mapped output value produced by mapping. After we click Execute button, SKYVVA generates the mapping preview here. Now I will run the test. Click the Execute button. SKYVVA now reads the payload from the editor and applies the inbound mapping. After the test finishes, the result preview appears on the right side. Here, you can see the result on the right side, which shows the tree view containing account, contact, and case. In the mapping, we use the concat formula to combine ACC name and ACC number. Now you can see the value in the description field, which is retrieved by combining ACC name and ACC number. And you can see that the contact node and case node show the results we mapped. Now the output is correct. The output is correct. It means the payload matches the message type structure. The source paths are correct. Field mapping is correct. Child nodes are recognized properly. Formulas or transforms produce correct output. We use the mapping test tool for the inbound interface to make sure the mapping results are what we expect. This lets us review the results before actual processing. After we check the result test mapping tool and confirm that inbound mapping is working as expected, we can perform real inbound processing. This video does not show the inbound processing, but you can carry it out based on your requirements. After showing the test mapping tool with the inbound interface, let's now work with the outbound interface. Case 2. Mapping test tool with outbound interface. In this case, we'll explain what outbound test mapping is and why we need it, and explain every button and how to run the SOQL query, how to read the result grid, and how to validate the generated outbound payload before real outbound processing. The outbound test mapping helps you validate that your SOQL query returns the expected Salesforce data. Your mapping logic transforms Salesforce fields correctly. SKYVVA generates the correct payload. You can detect issues early, like wrong query fields, null values, wrong paths, and mapping mistakes before sending data to the external system. In this demo, we use here an existing outbound interface that reads account records from Salesforce and generates JSON payload preview before sending data to an external API REST. This interface already links with REST message type template and outbound REST adapter. Now, click on Open Mapping. Before testing the mapping, make sure your mapping is complete. Here you can see that we have already completed the mapping. In this case, we map only one level. After completing the mapping, click Save. Now click on the Test Mapping button to test the mapping. We are currently on the Test Mapping Outbound interface screen. This screen has three main areas. On left panel, you can see Query Editor and SOQL Execution. On the bottom left, a Query Result Grid, the records returned from Salesforce. On right panel, Output Preview with two tabs, Result and Payload. At the top right, we have action buttons. You can see Execute, Test Connection, and Refresh. Now we will explain each button first. For Execute button, this button runs the outbound test mapping process end-to-end. SKYVVA execute the SOQL query, retrieves Salesforce data, applies your outbound mapping roles, produces the output preview in result and payload. So execute is the main action to generate the payload preview. For Test Connection button, this tests the connection to the outbound target adapter in the outbound interface. For example, SKYVVA can connect to an external API endpoint. file storage, SFTP, database destination, or any outbound connector. If test connection fails, the real outbound run may fail even if your mapping looks correct. 4. Refresh button. This button will reload to the default test mapping screen. Now, let's look at the left side. On the left panel, we have Query Editor and Message tab. In this demo, we use Query Editor. You can see two buttons, Execute SOQL and Open Query Editor. Now, we will explain both. For Execute SOQL button, this button runs the SOQL query and returns records into the grid below. It helps you confirm your query is correct before generating the outbound payload. For Open Query Editor button, this button opens an expanded query editor view, useful when you have longer queries, filters, join, or relationship queries. Now look at the right side.
On the right side, you see two tabs.
Result tab and Payload tab. Now I will explain the difference. For Result tab, the Result tab shows the mapped output in a structured tree format. Object name, field name, final mapped values after rules and transformations. Use Result when you want to validate the mapping field by field.
For Payload tab,
the Payload tab shows the final outbound message that SKYVVA will send to the destination, typically JSON, XML, or another format. In this example, SKYVVA generates JSON format. This preview is very important because it tells you exactly what the outbound system will receive. After we explain each button and the screen view areas, we will start testing the mapping tool with the outbound interface. Here is the query used in this demo. The query selects fields ID, billing city, billing country, account number, and name from the account object. You can customize this query to include all the fields necessary for your outbound mapping. This query retrieves the account field that we want to transform into our outbound payload. Confirm the SOQL query is correct. Click Execute SOQL to load records. After clicking the Execute SOQL button, the result grid shows return records. Here you can see the record ID, billing city, billing country, account number, and name. On the left side of each row, there is a checkbox. This lets you select which record you want to use for test mapping output. You can see it shows all the records that are on the Salesforce side. If you want to select records based on your desired conditions, you can use the Open Query Editor button. Click on the Open Query Editor button. Here, you can see the query statement. For example, we want to apply the condition where account number equals A01. Now click Execute SOQL. Here, you can see that it queries only the records where the account number has the value A01. Now click Save SOQL. In this demo, we select one record to keep the payload preview simple. Click Execute button. Now the payload is generated. Let's look at the output payload. You can see that the field value matches the record that we queried from Salesforce. Now look at the payload section. You can see that it generates a JSON payload that matches your mapping. When everything looks correct, then we can proceed with real outbound execution confidently. Now we have already demonstrated and explained the mapping test tool for both the inbound and outbound interfaces.
Summary.
In this video, you learned how to use test mapping in SKYVVA inbound and outbound mapping. We explained each button, adapter test connection, import file, save file, retrieve file, execute, and refresh. We also explained the payload editor tabs for CSV, XML, JSON, and message, and how to read the result panel to validate your mapping output for hierarchical data such as account, contact, and case. Using test mapping helps you confirm mapping structure, field values, and relationships before real inbound processing, reducing errors and saving time. Thanks for visiting our YouTube channel. See you in the next video.